Hey there, it's Marley. Welcome back to my booktube channel. Today we're going to be doing my May reading wrap-up. So let's talk about all the books that I read in May, but before we get into the book reviews, I'm going to do a little overview of my stats for the month. I have timestamps below if you want to skip this part and get right into the reviews, but if not, in May I read a total of 7 books, which is the same amount of books I've been reading the last few months. I really want to try and get this number to go up. Like 7 or 8 books is totally my average, but it would be nice to have a few months in there where I read more than my average. I am a few books behind my Goodreads goal, so right now I'm not super happy with the amount of books I'm reading, but anyways, that was approximately 2,806 words, 0 listening hours. I didn't read any audiobooks this month, but on a higher note, my average rating was a 4.07. Normally my average rating is 3 point something. So the fact that we hit 4 is actually pretty good. So that's something to feel good about. And then for books acquired, we have 10. I did a little haul this month, which you'll eventually see when I do my next book haul, but I did buy a bunch of books from Book Outlet this month, so that's where a lot of those books come from. And then in terms of books that I consider own voices, there was only 2. Oh wow, then in terms of genre, we did not have much diversity this month in terms of genre. This is quite rare for me actually. We had 4 fantasy books and 3 romance books. No other genres, just fantasy and romance, so that's kind of interesting. And then in terms of the formats that I read, 5 of the books I read were physical and 2 were ebooks, which I'm pretty happy about that stat because I definitely want to read more of my physical TBR. In terms of the age range for the books I read, 2 of them were adult, and then we had 5 young adult. More young adult than usual as well. And then in terms of author gender, we had 6 female authors and 2 male authors. One of the books I read was by 2 different authors, a male and a woman, so I counted both of them. And then for author status, it was completely equal. 4 of the authors I had read from before and 4 were new to me authors. And then the final stat year published for the books I read, so 1 book was from 2025, 2 were from 2024, 2 from 2023, and then 1 from 2022 and 1 from 2021, so all kind of newer books. All right, so now let's get into the book reviews. As always, I'm going to talk about these books in the order of my lowest rated to my highest rated, so stick around to see what my favorite book of the month was. Spoiler, there was a 5-star. Okay, so the first book that I want to talk to you about is Here's to Us. This is the book that was by 2 authors, so Becky Albertalli and Silvera. The reason I read this is because of the TBR card that I drew at the beginning of the month that said to read a book by multiple authors. So even though this was my lowest rated book, I honestly did not hate it at all. I rated it 3 stars and honestly considered rating it even higher. Like, this was not a bad book by any means. It is actually the sequel to another book called What If It's Us. So I read this a number of years ago when I was making my way through both Becky and Adam's books. It basically is a young adult contemporary romance about these 2 boys, Ben and Arthur. They kind of have a kismet meeting one day at a post office and then start dating and have this little romance, but it's only for the summer because I believe Arthur does not live in New York, which is where they met. He was just visiting for the summer. So they do, spoiler alert, decide to break up and they don't end up together in that first book. And I kind of liked that. It's kind of like a realistic love story for young adults, right? You're not always going to end up with your first love when you're 16. So that was kind of nice. And then this is the follow-up book that is now following Ben and Arthur again. It is 2 summers later. So they're a little bit older. They are now in college. Arthur has once again come to New York for the summer. So they start reconnecting and maybe are going to give it another chance. So yeah, it was honestly pretty cute, even though it was confusing me a little bit throughout. I wasn't sure what the romance was really going to end up being because both Arthur and Ben both have boyfriends at the beginning of this book. They were honestly pretty cute relationships, so I wasn't really sure if they were going to end up with each other or with their boyfriends. I won't spoil what it ends up being. But yeah, I just didn't love some of the YA tones to it as I am moving more into, you know, enjoying adult romances, and there were definitely some cringy things, mainly with one of the friends named Dylan. He was a really crazy kind of character. Some of his moments worked and were funny, and some were just a little bit too cringy for me. Yeah, I do think this book would be cute for a young adult reader, maybe for a reader who's really into reading about New York, because the setting was really nice in New York. There's a focus on like Broadway shows as well if you're interested in that. But yeah, I just think I'm a little bit too old to be like fully enjoying this kind of book, but I am glad that I read it and technically finished off this little duology. Speaking of finishing a duology, I also read Celestial Monsters by Aiden Thomas. So this is the second book in the Sunbearer Trials duology. I think the reason I read this is the TBR card I pulled said to read a book that had a couple on the cover. So obviously this is a couple here, Teo and Aurelio. But yeah, in the original book, Sunbearer Trials, it is a like fantasy kind of mythology story because we're in Reino del Sol, which has all of these like Latin gods and demigods or semidioses. Our main character Teo is a semidios. His mother is like the goddess or dios of birds, so that is why our main character has wings. But anyways, in this world, every like 10 or 20 years, there is this Sunbearer Trials competition where a bunch of the demigods compete, and then there is a sacrifice at the very end, and that is kind of what keeps the world running and what keeps the sun in the sky, basically. So I don't want to spoil the first one, obviously, but let's just say things don't really go to plan, and this book is definitely following the aftermath. I didn't enjoy it as much as the first book. I gave the first one 4 stars, and this was 3.5, so still a pretty decent series. And again, it's young adult, and I would definitely recommend more for young adult readers. I think it would work a lot more for them. But the first book was very much a competition book. It was really, really fun. This is more of like a quest book, and even though I do quite like quests, I don't know, it just wasn't really working for me, the actual like plot and pacing of this book. We also got a different point of view in this book as well, and I wasn't loving that person's point of view as much as Teo's. So yeah, still, if you like the first book, definitely still pick this up. It's very sweet. There's a lot of found family, cute friendships, and actual romances as well. Had a good little ending to it for the duology, but I don't know. I just kind of found myself hoping that I finished it because I was just kind of a little bit over it. But it is cute, again, for any young adult readers in your life. It also has trans representation, multiple trans characters, if you are looking for that. All right, now a few of these books I read for my monthly reading vlog, where I read 5-star predictions with the theme of being fantasy. Now all of these books ended up being YA fantasy. So the least favorite of that vlog that I read was Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This is quite a popular young adult romantasy, which is kind of why I didn't totally love it as much as I could have. I think I prefer a fantasy forward book rather than a romance forward book, if you know what I mean. But basically in this book we have our 2 main characters. Let me remind myself of their names. Iris and Roman. They are in this like fantasy world where the gods are at war. The 2 of them are reporters at this local newspaper, and they are rivals because they're both going after the same promotion. So at the beginning of the book, the kind of fantasy and war elements are more on the back burner, and more of the focus is kind of on the rivalry between these 2. They end up starting to write letters to each other, but they don't know that they're writing to each other. For some reason, there's this weird connection between them. When they write letters, it is delivered to each other magically. So they also start this little pen pal relationship as well. 4 stars overall. I did quite like it. I am going to read the sequel and see how the duology concludes. The fantasy and the war aspects come in a lot more in like the second half of the book, if reading about those types of things are interesting to you. I guess my biggest issue with this was that it did one of my least favorite tropes when it comes to the pen pal thing, where one of the people did end up knowing who they were talking to while the other didn't know who they were talking to. I just think, and I said this in my blog a lot, I just think it creates this weird power imbalance, and I don't like when one of the characters is aware and one's not. It feels like they can kind of take advantage of the situation. So that kind of ruined it a little bit for me. And then, as I said, I feel like the romance got a lot of focus. It got a little bit too cheesy for me. But yeah, overall, I still would recommend this if it sounds interesting to you, but just didn't end up being a 5-star like I had thought. One of the other books I read for that vlog was A Far Wilder Magic by Allison Saft, and I also ended up giving this one 4 stars. This is following our main character, Margaret. She is living alone because her mother, who is an alchemist, has kind of abandoned her. She's gone on some travels and hasn't been back in a while. So Margaret is a little bit of an outcast in the town. She's a bit lonely. And then, what's his name? Weston shows up. He is an alchemist in training, and he's hoping that Margaret's mother can take him under her wing, but he shows up and finds out the mom is gone. So he ends up just kind of checking in with Margaret in the house. There's definitely enemies to lovers vibes in this one as well, and grumpy sunshine, which I really liked. Margaret is definitely the more like grumpy, stoic one, and Weston is a very fun, flirty guy. So that was a really fun dynamic. It was definitely a slow burn romance between the two of them, but the main kind of plot is that they end up entering together in this magical competition where they're trying to hunt down this like fox creature. I forget what they call it in this. Some kind of mythical creature. But anyways, so Margaret is like the hunter of the two of them, and then Weston is like the alchemist. So they enter in the competition together. Now, again, my biggest issue with this is probably the fact that the competition, again, I don't want to give too much away, but like the competition does not happen till like the last 30 pages of the book, 50 pages of the book. It is mainly just lead up to the competition. And I just wish there could have been more to that, like more to the plot and not just the characters interacting with other people in the town. And like, again, didn't hate it, gave it 4 stars, definitely liked it and would read more from this author. And as I said before, the dynamic between the 2 main characters was really fun to read, but I wanted more from that fantastical element. I wanted more from the competition and the hunt. And unfortunately, this one was just a little too romance forward, again, similar to Divine Rivals. And at the end, again, it just gets to be a little bit too cheesy for me. I love the slow burn, but then once they get to the end and they're like absolutely in love and obsessed with each other, I'm like, it was too big of a jump, you know what I mean? So anyway, obviously I have some hang-ups with romantasy. Overall, I do recommend this if you like slow burn, if you like some whimsical fantasy. So yeah, and it's a standalone, so you don't have to invest too much. These next 2 books I gave 4.5 stars, so close to 5. Sometimes I'm like, should I just have given it a 5? But I don't know, I'm being weird with my ratings lately with 5 stars. But we have A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston. I love this author. She is, of course, the author of The 7-Year Slip, which is one of my favorite romances of all time. All of her romances have a little bit of whimsical, like magical realism. And in this one, we have a main character named Elsie, or Eileen is her full name, and she is still a little bit traumatized by her breakup. She hasn't been having luck in the love department, in the romance department, and she, ever since her breakup, has just gotten obsessed with romance books. If you are someone obsessed with romance books, I would recommend picking this up because I think you'll find it really relatable. But in particular, she's obsessed with this one romance series. She normally always talks about it with her friends in her little book club that she has. And they always meet up once a year because they're all like internet friends, but they meet up in person once a year at this cabin or cottage or whatever. So this year, none of her friends can make it, but she's like, you know what? I'm still gonna go. I still need my weekend away. So she's driving there, and on her way there, her car, I think something goes wrong with her car. There's like a rainstorm, and she ends up taking this wrong turn into this little town. Now, in the morning, she finds a place to stay, and in the morning she realizes, oh my god, this is the town that's in my favorite book series. So that's the magical realism aspect. Somehow she is transported into this like fictional town. It's reminiscent of like cute small towns like from Gilmore Girls and stuff like that. So while she's in this town, she's loving it. She's interacting with her favorite book characters. It's very fun. Again, I think it'd be very relatable for any book lovers like us. But there's this one man there. What was his name again? Anders or something. She doesn't remember from the books. Like, she doesn't remember reading him. So they start to kind of have this relationship. It is enemies to lovers again. They definitely are not getting along at first. Grumpy sunshine again. Always love that. But yeah, so she does end up, you know, getting her own love story. And there's a lot of like personal growth she has to go through. Ashley Poston, that's why I love her. She always has that kind of thing in her books of like grief and the characters really having to grow and move through their trauma. So Anders and Elsie both have to deal with that. So I just really love this book. Clearly, what held me back from the 5-star rating I'm trying to think. There was something that happened at the end that was a bit surprising. I could see some people not loving, and I feel like maybe it didn't totally sit right with me. It's hard to remember actually why I didn't give it a full 5 stars, but there was just something kind of missing. It wasn't quite the 7-year slip level. But that being said, I still really loved it. And I feel like I haven't heard people talk about it as much as a 7-year slip, but I still really want to recommend it, especially for romance lovers, or if you liked her other books, because yeah, it was super cute, heartwarming. I appreciated some of the like references to Inkheart, which is one of my favorite books from when I was younger. And in Inkheart, it has to do with the main characters like going into their favorite book. So I can tell she really got inspiration from that, and yeah, I really liked that. All right, back to the third book I read for that 5-star predictions video. So the one that got closest to being 5 stars was A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. I gave it 4.5. This book I really liked. Like, would definitely read more from Ava Reid, and there is actually a sequel coming out this year, or actually in June. Definitely will be reading that. But anyway, in this book, what is our main character? Effie. So Effie goes to college. She wasn't able to get into the program she wanted, which was literature, because in this world, there's still a lot of sexism and misogyny, the patriarchy, all that fun stuff. So women are not allowed in the literature program, so she goes for her second favorite, which is architecture. Meanwhile, she is obsessed with this author. I think it's like Emrys was his name, something Emrys. So then there's this like competition where you can go and win the chance to like redesign this author's estate, because he has recently passed away and his son is like holding this contest. So she ends up winning the chance to go to her favorite author's estate and redesign it and stuff. So she goes there, and it's a really creepy house. Like, if you want the gothic like creepy vibes, you're gonna get it in this book. It is like falling apart. There's water everywhere. It's leaking, like very creepy. And then this other boy is there. Is his name Preston? Yes, Preston. And he's also from her school, and he is there, and they're enemies to lovers as well. So many enemies to lovers this month. I loved it. Yeah, they are kind of like have a little rivalry at first, but then they end up befriending each other, and she finds out the reason he's there is to find out if this Emrys guy, this author, was actually a fraud, because there's some proof out there, some theories that he might have not actually written his work. So she ends up teaming up with him to figure this out, the mystery of this estate and this author. His son, who's there, is acting really creepy, and there's other creepy things going on in the town, and we find out some mystery stuff in Effie's past, some drama going on with her. The plot actually doesn't sound fantastical, but there is fantasy elements. I just don't want to spoil things or give too much away, but yeah, it was really epic. I just couldn't give it the full 5 stars because certain things annoyed me with the characters not figuring things out with the mystery soon enough. It just didn't feel realistic that they wouldn't have figured it out. And then also the pacing at the very end, like, I don't know, it had this really epic moment, and then the very ending was kind of like, The pacing didn't totally work at the end. But anyways, really love this book. If it sounds interesting at all to you, really would recommend. That just leaves my favorite book of the month, which I already said I gave 5 stars. That's The Favorites by Layne Fargo. This is the first book I read from her. It is definitely inspired by like Taylor Jenkins Reid. I think she even shouts her out in her acknowledgements. And so I really knew going into it I was gonna love it. It is about this figure skating couple, Katerina and Heath, because it is inspired by Wuthering Heights. I did read that book actually in high school because it was Bella Swan's favorite book. So in my Twilight era, I did suffer through that book. I didn't love it because it's a classic and it was very hard to understand. But obviously, you know, Catherine and Heathcliff are known to have this like toxic relationship from that book. So anyway, it is based on that or inspired by it. So we have Katerina and Heath. They are childhood friends to lovers. Katerina's family actually took Heath in and kind of like adopted him when he was young because he was an orphan. And then they started figure skating together because Kat's dream, her mission really, is to become a famous figure skater, compete in the Olympics and all of that. So Heath loves Kat. He would do anything for her, so he trains with her to be her skating partner. So it is just following their whole saga of them, you know, training to become elite figure skating athletes and all of the drama that happens. This was so good. It was definitely like a Taylor Jenkins Reid, like Daisy Jones and the Six or Evelyn Hugo, following these famous people and all of the behind the scenes drama that they go through in their life. All of the scandal. There's these other characters that they end up getting very wrapped up in that drama. So I was just living for the drama, for the tea. Couldn't stop reading, honestly. And it's told in a similar style to Daisy Jones, where we do have like a documentary that is being made. So we're hearing these different people speak in the documentary, and then we are hearing from Kat herself of kind of like the real story. So yeah, this was great. I mean, I've been seeing great things about it, so I'm just here to agree with them and say you definitely should read this, especially if you enjoyed any of Taylor Jenkins Reid's books. Oh yeah, even Carrie Soto, because that was focused on like a tennis player and her whole career. So it's definitely reminiscent to that book as well. I would just say maybe the ending I wasn't totally obsessed with, but still really, really good, and excited to read more from Layne Fargo because I have not read her other books yet. So yeah, that is my wrap up. You can see why I had such a high average rating this month, because I did give a lot of books 4 or 4.5 stars or 5 stars. So pretty good reading month in terms of that. Let me know any of your thoughts down below if you've read any of these books or if now you want to. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you soon in my next video. Bye.